بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Welcome everyone to Misconception, a weekly show where we are simply going to talk about the misconception that the people have and how we can fix it. Before that, I would really want to keep a small ritual for me, and for that I just wanted to read a little bit of poetry, which is going to be in Arabic. I really want the Arabic language for so many reasons. I even wrote some poetry of myself. I wouldn't be able to share it, but I'm very proud of that. But to start with this talk, I just want to talk about the following: misconceptions about life and misconceptions about expectations. But before that, let's do a little bit of poetry. So, one of the most famous poets back in the days, he was a slave with the name of عنترة ibn Shaddad, and he said: وللموت خير للفتى من حياته إن لم يثب للأمر إلا بقائد فعال جزيمات الأمور ولا تكن هيبات الفؤاد همة للسوائد. And from this very small piece of poetry, we can simply understand a lot of things. Our misconception about life is completely different, and what we understand mostly is wrong. Apparently, after a certain amount of time in the one's life, when he started to become a bit bothered with life and its daily operations, he stopped reading. And that's one of the most crucial points that any person of us will going to go through. Stopping reading means that you're going to lose a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, where you can simply grab things as you go, or simply get what we call nowadays as fake news or fake data or fake anything. This matter moved away from simply life, but it was to do even to the basics of things. The one's religion. I'm not talking about the one who doesn't have any religion. I'm talking about the most religious people, the people who have a little bit of religion within themselves. I'm not claiming to be the most religious guy here or the most religious guy in town, but I have a lot of friends who happen to provide a lot of questions that simply goes very deep about the idea of creation, the idea of life, purpose, why we are here, why we are doing things the way we do. And that part somehow can be very surprising, because as much as I'm concerned, I love to think that religion is not a bounding matter. Religion is within each and every one of us. Religion is something that doesn't govern, but mostly give you a set of orientations. And I happen to be a Muslim. And when you are a Muslim, the idea of life, death, money, family, partner, kids, daily problems are one of the things that are pretty much well explained in life and pretty much explained in religion. And the misconception here is that we are meant to suffer in life. And that's what takes me to a very funny story by a historian, by a king and a historian. This king, back in the early times of life, wanted to read the history. So he literally looked for the most famous historian of his time. And he said to him, "Go, take your time and write me history. I want to read the history." The guy went for tens of years, and then he came back to the king and said, after a long time, he said, "Hi dear king, this is history." And there is like literally tens of books, huge binders, where he mentioned all the historical facts that happened in this world for the pleasure of the king. The king looked at this historian and said, "I'm a king. I cannot read all of this. Can you please somehow resume it for me, like summarize it for me, because I don't have time to read all of this." The historian actually went and took a lot of time as well to summarize all the major historical event, and he came back to the king. He found the king in his deathbed, and that was very miserable part. So when he came to the king and said, "This is the summarized history, or summarized part of the history," the king said to the historian, "I'm on my deathbed. Can you please summarize it in a couple of sentences to me? At least I will not die dumb." The historian looked at the king and said, "They lived, they suffered, and they died." And I really, as much as I love to be the most pessimistic person in the room, I really admire the fact that it's not about that. I met people from all over the world. I've been traveling in my own way through my work, and I'm seeing people from Pakistan, from India to Alaska, from Norway to South Africa, and meeting all those people and their conceptions and their ideas about life. And I managed to talk more about that as I don't want to be that person that I hate small talk, but I really want to see the essence of people and what they are made of. And sometimes I just ask them the question like, how do you feel? Like, what's life to you and how things are? Different people gave me surprisingly different answers. And what makes me think that I'm missing most of what life is all about is the idea of misconception. We do have misconception about everything. We are not reading much about what happened before. If you want to see the patterns, you will find that the history actually repeats itself in so many levels. If you want to see most into the economy, and that's something I'm very passionate about, and I hope I will have the ability to talk about it later on in this podcast, you will find out that economy, for instance, repeats itself. How, we might say. We have in economy something called the economical crisis. The economical crisis is sometimes a problem that happens after a certain amount of times due to some kind of reasons, and it hits the economy in a way or another when it causes either inflation, that's something I think we hear a lot about nowadays, or called like a stagnation, something that we are seeing mostly in Japan, or called it nowadays what we call a stagflation, where we have a stagnation in the economy, but at the same time you're going to find that the prices are going higher and there is an inflation, and the economical activities is sometimes going less. Actually, the world suffered from this capitalism, and I don't want to also talk about capitalism and socialism, that's far from my interest, but the whole capitalism world suffered a lot from crises. We have namely the one that we got in 1927 to 29, the one that we got in the 80s with gold, and the other one that we got in 2008 with economic crisis back in the stock market. And nowadays that we are living nowadays with the whole Russian war and the whole situation. So we can see that economical factors are somehow the same. There is a crisis behind everything. There is a crisis behind each and every economical crisis. There is something there is a drive to it, and the word repeats itself. We keep on having this over and over again. I happen to be an economic student. I actually asked one of my professors during my studies and said, "Professors, since we know that we all have this crisis, why we keep sticking to the same model?" He mentioned and said in one sentence, "Because we don't have any other." So we are not learning. We are having the same misconception. We are having the same thing as in, if it's working, fine, don't break it. So that one translates from history to economics to socialism to social scene to psychology, and it will going to affect you in a way or another. You're going to ask yourself, how this is going to affect me? I'm a common man or a common woman. I don't want to be misogynistic here. And you will say, how this is going to affect me in a way or another? Actually, it would. And its effect is going to hit you in the most basic way. See your grocery shopping, see your bills, see your salaries. What was your salary making in a year ago, it's not doing the very same thing now. So our misconception about economy, our misconceptions about sociologies, our misconception about the psychology of people we work with, and our non-ability to have time to read because we are so caught up with life is challenging. I would say that, and actually I was talking to my partner the other day, and I said, the more I get older, the older I get, the less I know. And nowadays I'm living in a cycle where I simply don't know anything. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what will happen. And I don't know how I'm going to do anything. And I'm suffering from the very same misconception about what should be done. And should we do anything about it, to be honest? Should we do anything to change our situation? Should we do anything to be better? But then, what's being better? To be honest, what's being better? Being better means that you are, and it's also very subjective matter. Being better as in being better in life, being better with your family, being better in work. Well, what's being better? What's the threshold of being great? What's the threshold of being great, being super, being awesome, being satisfied? And that's something probably is driving the nowadays quest. People are looking for the satisfaction in a way or another. If your satisfaction is not in your personal well-being, maybe it's in your work, maybe it's in your family, maybe in your personal development, maybe in your religion, maybe in your lack of religion, maybe in your abandoning of the religion, or maybe in your wealthiness, maybe in your huge load of money. So that's also a misconception that we have, that what's happiness here? And this actually leads me to think more about what I see people suffering from. We are living in a world where there is a lot of suffering, and people and the shrinks or the psychologists are the one with the load of work. I do believe that there will be no age where psychological problem, economical problem, social problem, and even, for God's sake, sanitary problem and health problem are going to collide and work in a collision or a correlation like we are having in those ages. And again, I don't want to be pessimistic here about it, but I found actually there is no escape. I remember back in the COVID times, I was in my country, my home country, Algeria, and actually my city was the very first city that got a lockdown. We had like around 10 cases, and there would be like a city or a state lockdown. We will not be able to go out or do anything. And I remember I got laid off in the middle of it. But it was a very interesting experience. And how I was thinking about what should be done next in a place where the whole world was doing a massive layoffs and there is a sanitary problem. So what should we do next? The idea of accepting the status quo was very challenging, and for me, I actually didn't know what to do back in the days. I think most of the population didn't know what to do, and how they were behaving was different. We seen the people who simply wanted to party in a way or another. We wanted to see people that were missing their friends because they simply too big on friends. We see people that are simply wanting to do more things, and that's what made the cases going up and up and up and up in the scope of like a couple of months till we reach the peak. But our misconception of how we should handle a crisis governed our reaction back in the days. And even now, we are out of COVID times. People are trying to behave like nothing happened. But that's also a misconception. What will happen in the future? What will happen tomorrow? What will happen the next days? What will happen in a few hours? is very scary. Remember, governments had to act on a timely manner, on a real-time manner, and gave recommendations to the citizen as they go, meaning that our whole life can literally change with a call that someone in a suit, in an office, in the capital of any country makes. So this changes everything, meaning that the whole planning that we are doing, the whole ideation, the whole thinking process, dreaming even, is pointless. Because the variation of the life events that is happening nowadays is so strong and so fast that doesn't even give you the ability to reflect. Ask yourself, when was the very last time that you reflected on something? Where you simply sit for a couple of minutes and said, okay, let me reflect on what happened this week. And I bet most of you didn't do that ever in their lives. And that's completely understandable. We are not shaming anyone here. But the very idea of sitting for a couple of minutes and simply say, let me reflect about life, becomes so toxic and was represented in a very bad manner from different people. I'm talking about the TikTokers here. They made it sound like it's depressing, it's bad. You're going to remember all your problems. But then, how you would solve any of your problems if you don't simply reflect? And that's another misconception that the population has. Because imagine the following. Imagine that you are sick and you need to get healed ASAP. So what you would do? You would go to the hospital or you would look for a doctor. So meaning that you need to admit that there is a problem going on. So you can go to the hospital or go to a doctor, and that doctor in return is going to heal you. So that's actually the very first or the basics of all things here. Admitting that we are having a misconception. That we are having a misconception about our families, about our life, about partners, goals, career, kids, religion, ideation, relationships. Is probably the very first path to redemption. And that's something that would be extremely interesting concept to think about. Take some time to reflect. Take some time to think about your thoughts, about whether your thoughts are exactly where they should be in nowadays scene. Take some time off your day. I know you are busy. I know work is hectic. I know your work is demanding. I know your life is demanding. I know your studies are demanding. But try to steal a couple of minutes to think about this. What can I do to be better? Ask these questions over and over and over, and you will find yourself trying to find solutions. Once you start to look for solutions, the rest is history. Because that's the starting path of our misconception healing journey. And that's exactly the thing that we are going to talk about in the scope of this podcast. This one and the next of the other ones. It was a pleasure talking to you. And again, stay safe, much love, and see you in the next one. Peace.